Bubsy. You may remember this infamous bobcat as the video game mascot that tried to be the next Sonic the Hedgehog. Back in the 90s, going fast and talking trash was what it was all about. You see, Bubsy's fast, and he talks. A lot. But where's the trash? Well, look no further. I am basically a garbage man because I've beaten every Bubsy game and could sort out the trash from the not so trash. So grab your favorite white t-shirt because we're doing a Bubsy tier list. What could possibly go wrong? Before we get started, I gotta mention Bubsy 4D, the new Bubsy game coming out May 22nd. Obviously, I haven't played it yet, so it's not gonna be on the list. But I am doing a free giveaway of the Steam version of Bubsy 4D. So if you'd like a chance to win, all you gotta do is follow me on Twitch to enter, link and details under the video. Now then, let's get started back where it all began. It's Bubsy in Claws Encounters of the Furred Kind on Super Nintendo. The date was May 1993. When Bubsy the Bobcat first jumped onto the scene. The creator of the game, Michael Berlin. Rumor has it he played Sonic the Hedgehog for 14 hours a day for a whole week in order to develop the inspiration for the Speedy Bobcat. Which begs the question, does Bubsy play just like Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, kind of. He's fast like Sonic. Of course, there's one thing that Bubsy is lacking that Sonic had plenty of. And of course, I'm talking about rings, okay? This is the magic little item that lets Sonic take damage and not die. You know what Bubsy does have instead of rings? He has 9 lives, so they must have assumed it's fine, you'll just die more, but you'll still finish the level. That's not what happens here. You just die over and over again. Trust me, I know. Anyway, the first Bubsy game, the music is pretty good. It starts off, I'd say, like most 2D platformers on the Super Nintendo. It's honestly a pretty good time, but the difficulty quickly ramps up at the start of the canyon levels, where you're going through the desert on the train. On the bright side, if you do get a game over, each time you defeat a boss in this game, they give you a password. So, you could put the password in to pick up at the level that you died on. The real question for this game boils down to, can you complete 3 levels in a row and defeat a boss with 9 lives? If you could do that, the game gives you a password, and you could use that to go to the next 3 levels, and then fight the boss after that. And so on, until the final level with the final boss. Now, a lot of people say the first Bubsy game is the best of the Bubsy games, and it was all downhill from here. I am not one of these people. I disagree with that. I think it is a pretty good Super Nintendo game. Even if you're a casual gamer and you like 2D platformers, you can play this game and have a good time, probably up until level 7 or so. And if you really like a challenge, if maybe you're somebody who thought Super Mario World was too easy, this might be the game for you, because this is pretty tough. Think about doing Super Mario World, only it's much tougher, and you don't get any power-ups. You die in one hit. That's basically Bubsy. Now let's talk about how you control Bubsy in this game. Picture a Super Nintendo controller. All 4 buttons on the right side of the controller, A, B, X, Y. Every single one of them is a jump button. 2 of them are big jumps, 2 of them are small jumps, which if you hold down the small jump, you can glide. And you're gonna need the glide, because if you jump from a great height and don't tap or use the glide, Bubsy hits the ground with such a great force that he takes fall damage and literally dies. That's right, they put fall damage in a 2D platformer. A lot of people are shocked and outraged by this, but honestly, I think it's pretty fine. It just means they made it a little bit of a harder game. All that being said, I'm gonna put Bubsy on the Super Nintendo at actually not that bad. You'll have a good time playing this one, at least up until level 6. And if you really want to prove yourself as a gamer, you could try to get to the credits screen. I think it's not that bad. But it didn't stop there. Accolade, the company that made Bubsy at the time, decided to put out a Sega Genesis port of the Super Nintendo Bubsy game, Claws Encounters of the Furred Kind. And I don't believe that they got official licensing rights from Sega. So they wound up producing Bubsy on the Sega Genesis on this weird bootleg cartridge. The developer bypassed Sega's licensing systems and reverse engineered a way to get their cartridge to play on the Sega Genesis. And they were actually sued by Sega over this. However, the courts eventually ruled in the favor of Accolade here. In the end, I guess it all worked out. Sega fans got to enjoy Bubsy 1. Having played both the versions, I'll say obviously the music's a little different because you're using the Sega Genesis sound chip. The graphics are slightly different. I do believe they also changed some of the bosses. If I remember right, some of the bosses, like the boss of the canyon level, is easier, but I remember the last boss being harder on the Sega Genesis version. Given the choice between the two, I would have to go with the Super Nintendo version. However, they're close enough that I would put them next to each other on the tier list. Actually, not that bad. If you're a diehard Sega fan and you don't want to touch a Super Nintendo console, go ahead, play it on Genesis. It's basically the same thing. Last but not least, from the original game, we can't leave out the PC gamers. Now, we're not talking about Steam here, okay? We're talking about Windows 95. Way back in the day, they ported Bubsy, and I shouldn't say port even. They made this game as a PC version. Not many people have played this game. It's also not included in the Bubsy in the Perfect collection that came out. Now, there were a few changes to Super Bubsy that you're not going to see in the console version, okay? Of course, the music was a better quality because Super Bubsy was a CD-based game. It came out on a compact disc. Not only that, because it was a CD-based game, much like the PlayStation, they were able to include cutscenes, believe it or not. And you might be asking yourself, why the hell did they develop cutscenes for a PC port of Bubsy? Well, they didn't. If you didn't know this, Bubsy the Bobcat, really trying to be Sonic the Hedgehog, got his own cartoon back in the 90s, at least a pilot episode, okay? And you can actually see this if you have the Perfect collection. It's included in there. It was a full-length 30-minute pilot, about 30 minutes with ads, I suppose. And one of the cool features of Super Bubsy is that you can collect these TV power-ups in the game. And the first time I'm playing this, I had no idea what they did. But it turns out, if you get a game over, or if you beat the game, depending on how many TVs you picked up, you can watch a certain amount of the Bubsy cartoon, which is pretty cool, especially if you consider the fact that this is, you know, the mid-90s. It's not like anybody could just pull up the internet and go on YouTube and look at the Bubsy cartoon. No, I mean, if you didn't catch it on TV or make a VHS recording, how were you gonna see it? Well, I guess the only way was to buy the Super Bubsy disc and play the game. Another really cool feature that Super Bubsy had was that you could create saves and then load your saves. So basically it was like having a save state feature back then, which, let's be honest, for Bubsy 1, that is a great asset to have as you're trying to make your way through this very difficult game. And last but not least, one of the coolest features of Super Bubsy is that they have a difficulty setting. You could either play it as the normal difficulty, which I believe is called Bobcat. You could play on easy mode, called Kitten mode, or hard mode, which is Tiger mode. And depending on which mode you set the game to, you get more or less lives, and there are more or less power-ups that spawn. I don't know if there are more or less enemies, but I will say, playing it on Kitten mode, it was quite easy. A lot easier than the Super Nintendo version. If you are gonna play Bubsy 1, I put this as the definitive version. You get more options. It is a pain to set up, especially if you're playing on a virtual machine. I remember I had to play this with the keyboard controllers, so I was using the arrow keys and spacebar or something to jump. If you can get a controller, an actual controller hooked up with this thing, I think it's peak. It's better than the other two versions. There you go. Next up, we've got Bubsy 2. Banking in on the success of Bubsy 1, you know Accolade couldn't stop there. They had a real cash cow on their hand in the form of a pantsless Bobcat. Bubsy 2 came out on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, but we're going to talk about the Super Nintendo version first. This was the first one that I played, and man, does this game have problems. Let me break it down for you. Is it easier than Bubsy 1? Yes. And why is it easier? Because you could take a few hits before dying. In Bubsy 1, you died instantly when getting hit by anything. In Bubsy 2, there is like a 3 HP system, and you can restore health by collecting bandages. However, there are many things, in my opinion, that make this game a worse game than Bubsy 1. First, the level design. You go through 5 different types of levels: a medieval European theme, a music theme, which is complete nightmare fuel, a space-themed level that has the gravity turned down, so you're floating around and the jumps go super high. And we can't forget the Egyptian one, where you're basically going through an Egyptian tomb, and there are switches and puzzles everywhere, and you'll be hopelessly lost. Not to mention the water pits that come out of nowhere that kill you in one hit, the fire pits that do the same thing. There is also a interesting flying segment. There's a flying themed level, which is kind of cool that you could play a shoot 'em up as Bubsy. I do like those. This game also gives Bubsy a gun, believe it or not. Way before Shadow the Hedgehog, they gave Bubsy the Bobcat a gun. Not a real gun. They gave him a Nerf gun, and believe it or not, it was an official collab with Nerf. That or they just used it anyway, but I doubt they would do that. They gave Bubsy a Nerf gun, and he could shoot things. He's also got bombs and his portable hole. That's actually what they called it. For some reason, that lets you escape the level. But yeah, those levels that I described, you basically go through 3 different floors where you repeat those levels in different layouts, but it's the same theme. Also, you can choose to either go the East Wing or the West Wing when you start Bubsy 2, and that means that there are 30 levels total, 15 levels on each side of the game. So you could play through this game twice to get to the ending. You only have to do half the game to fight the last boss. And speaking of bosses, at the end of each floor you have to fight a boss, and the boss of floor 1 and 2 is literally just a bunch of enemies behind doors. It's the laziest boss design I've ever seen. I don't know why they weren't a little bit more creative with that. The last boss is kind of cool, you know, it's very creative, but otherwise no. They also included some of the characters from the Bubsy cartoon in this, like Terry and Terry, Bubsy's nephews. But overall, Michael Berlin, the creator of Bubsy, I don't think he was directly involved in this one, and it really shows. It's missing the charm and heart that the first game had. And for that reason, I'm gonna put it in the how could they do this category. Next up, we've got the Sega Genesis version of Bubsy 2. Now, something I didn't mention before was that this game also has an in-game currency and an in-game shop. Now, in Bubsy 2, you could sell a whole bunch of items that you collected that you may not want to use and buy extra lives with it, which is really important because in Bubsy 2, there are not unlimited continues. When you get a game over, you have to start from level 1. There are no passwords, nothing like that. The problem with Bubsy 2 is they made the lives cost extra money. It costs more money in Bubsy 2 to buy lives, and you can't sell items to get money. So Bubsy 2 on Genesis, in my opinion, is a much harder game. The one good thing it does have going for it, I think, is that the camera is farther zoomed out. I'm trying to remember. I think the camera's farther zoomed out in Bubsy 2 Genesis, so you could see more of what's going on and react faster. I don't know. I had an easier time with this game on the Super Nintendo, and for that reason, I am going to put Bubsy 2 on the Genesis 1 rank lower than the Super Nintendo Bubsy. Down there at the bottom with how could they possibly do this? They could have did a much better job with this, but you know what? They didn't. And they didn't stop there either. Next up, we've got Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy, okay? They had to have Bubsy on the go. It wasn't enough to have Bubsy on your home console. No, you gotta have Bubsy in your pocket. Is that a Bubsy in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? I'm not happy, because I'm playing Bubsy. And this is Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy. Imagine Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy. Obviously, it would have been impossible to do a one-to-one port of Bubsy 2 to the Game Boy. So what you wind up getting is a much slower, black and white nightmare. The only good thing Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy has going for it is that there are only 3 levels per floor. So you could beat the game much faster than the other one and be done with it and move on to doing better things with your day. But that being said, unless your goal is to play through all the Bubsy games, there is no reason any sane person should play Bubsy 2 on the Game Boy. Now, you're probably asking yourself, Foxxy, why didn't you put that in the bottom category? Why didn't you rank Bubsy 2 Game Boy as literal torture? Well, that's because this next game deserves that category all to itself. We're talking about Bubsy on the Atari Jaguar. The Atari Jaguar, the world's first 64-bit console. Bubsy, now owned by Atari, on his own console, basically his own mascot. He's the Mario of the system. He's the Sonic of the system. What could possibly go wrong? Some people out there think that Bubsy and Fractured Furry Tales is a port of Bubsy 1 to the Atari Jaguar. It is not. It is its own complete game. 15 levels of pure hell. This is the Dark Souls of 2D platformers. We're talking about massive 2D levels with branching paths that make no sense, instant death at every corner, bees that come out of nowhere and kill Bubsy instantly. If you're not afraid of bees before playing this game, you will be afterwards, trust me. I kid you not. The first time I played Bubsy on Atari Jaguar, I spent almost 3 hours trying to figure out how to get out of level 1. Now, I have to make a distinction for Bubsy on the Jaguar, okay? I am a speedrunner of this game. After playing it and optimizing it and trying to do it as fast as I can, I think this game is super fun. But for the typical audience out there, And for me, on my first playthrough, it is not fun at all. Does it have any redeeming qualities? Well, the music is pretty good. Another nice thing is when you're running around, the camera quickly zooms in a way where you can see where you're going a lot better than the first two Bubsy games we were talking about. This game has Bubsy going through different fairy tale levels like Alice in Wonderland and Jack and the Beanstalk and Hansel and Gretel trying to rescue Mother Goose from these twisted creatures. I don't know. It's a very strange game. The music is good, the gameplay is fast, but you die in one hit. Also, the collisions are very wonky. Sometimes you'll try to jump on something and it'll just kill you for no reason. Anybody that has played this game will agree with me. Bubsy on Atari Jaguar is literally torture. And if you haven't played it, you know, go give it a shot. See if you disagree with me. See if you can get out of level 1. Okay, next up, we've got Bubsy 3D. Bubsy's big breakthrough into the world of 3D gaming. The year was 1996. This was a mad race for who could come out with the best 3D mascot game. It was Mario 64 versus Crash Bandicoot versus Bubsy. And you know what? Bubsy came out third after those other two games. And what they delivered to us is not remembered fondly, okay? First off, they got rid of the fall damage. At least there was that. Second, this game has tank controls, which it does make sense in a way, because in 1996, the PlayStation 1 controller did not have an analog stick. You know, the N64 did. They had that, the Trident controller, but the PlayStation didn't. They just had a D-pad and the 4 buttons, like a Super Nintendo. And when you play Bubsy 3D, you can tell that it's very much designed to have tank controls. This was also the first Bubsy since the original Bubsy, where the creator Michael Berlin was involved again in the creative process, and you can kind of tell it is very charming at times. It's got an intro cutscene, it's got voice acting, there are special death animations. If you leave the controller idle for too long, Bubsy starts messing with your TV. He's also voice acted by Lonnie Manelli, who's the voice of Rouge the Bat in Sonic Adventure 2. If you didn't know, now you know. I'm sorry I ruined that for you. But all things considered, if you could detach yourself from your expectations of what a 3D game should be, picture yourself in the year 1996 and playing Bubsy 3D. Honestly, there could be worse games out there. And if you keep all that in mind, I think Bubsy 3D is actually not that bad. And I place it above Bubsy 1, especially for people that have not played Bubsy before. Granted, Bubsy 3D does get really difficult towards the end of the game. And if you go for the 100% completion, there is a lot of cryptic stuff in there to try to find the rocket ship pieces to escape the alien planet. All right, next up, we've got Bubsy and the Woolies Strike Back. Picture this, Bubsy 3D came out in 1996, and people hated it so much that they booed Bubsy off the stage, and he disappeared for many, many years. It was actually 21 years since Bubsy 3D. The game was first announced in June of 2017. Now, Woolies Strike Back returns to the 2D Bubsy format. It does have 3D styled graphics, but it is a 2D game. And also, it's not a very long game. The gameplay is very similar to Bubsy 1. There is a setting where you can increase the frequency of how much Bubsy talks, which is pretty funny. And man, if you set that to 100%, he never shuts up. It's got bosses, it's got collectibles, it's got achievements because it's a Steam game. And honestly, I think this is a pretty okay game. I would, if you like Bubsy, I would say you would enjoy the Woolies Strike Back. However, do I think it's worth $20, which is the last time I've seen it being sold for? No. But if you can grab it on sale for $5, which it does go for sale for $5 sometimes, and you like Bubsy, I'd say check it out. I'm gonna put it in the middle. What could possibly go wrong? It's just an average 2D platformer game. They also did give Bubsy a pounce attack in this, which is kind of weird. That's not the Bubsy I know. The Bubsy I know isn't supposed to do any damage. In Bubsy, every button is supposed to be a jump. Well, anyway, they didn't stop there. We've also got another Bubsy game. I know many of you who clicked on this video probably didn't anticipate there being so many Bubsy games, but there are. We've got Bubsy Paws on Fire, and he got a glow up for this one. Man, does he look hideous. What the heck did they do to the Bobcat? He looks like that guy from The Simpsons that works the deep fryers at the fast food place. They've also brought back many of the characters from the cartoons. They added some cutscenes. But to my surprise, this game is not really a platformer game. It is a 2D game, but when you play as Bubsy or Virgil, the game just auto-scrolls. You don't actually move your character left or right. It moves for you, and the only thing you really have to do is jump. or press up and down to do certain things. It almost reminds me of a mobile game called Geometry Dash, if you guys have ever played that. It's quite similar. However, I do think it's way too easy. The only thing that kind of makes this game fun for me is the added challenge of trying to collect every yarn ball in a stage. Because it's not like you can go backwards to pick up one that you missed. No, you got to have the perfect run when you attempt the level. And this game does have a fair amount of level and a lot to do. It also has a bonus mode where you play as the armadillo guy and you have to collect gems in the same style as a Sonic 2 bonus stage where you used to collect rings with Tails and Sonic. Much like Woolies Strike Back, I would not recommend this one for $25 or whatever they're charging for now, but if you can get it on sale for $5, I think I would have to say it's kind of okay. I would still put it above Bubsy 2. Which brings us to the final Bubsy game. This was Bubsy in the Perfect Collection. Now, I am not ranking the Perfect Collection, but I am going to rank the refurbished edition of Bubsy 3D that they made for the Perfect Collection. This was a big selling point of the game. They recreated Bubsy 3D with widescreen support, with a free moving camera that you could control with your right analog stick, and they got rid of the tank controls. And what do you know? It turns out that Bubsy 3D actually plays better, in my opinion, with tank controls. It's almost like the game was designed to be played with tank controls. You know, I really thought that this was going to be some incredible thing. Like, wow, they're really going to fix it. And I do appreciate that the game developers took the time to make this, because it is pretty cool. It is a neat mode to play the game, but some things just don't work right with it. So when you play the original Bubsy 3D and you jump, the camera goes right over your head so you can see where you're going to land. This does not happen in the refurbished edition. In that version, you have to manually move the camera to see where you're going. Not only that, when you land on platforms, especially over water, if you literally just touch the side of the platform, Bubsy gets coyote time where he just hangs over the water, but you can't control him, and then he instantly dies. And I feel like it was much easier to not die by falling off platforms in the original version of Bubsy 3D. So having played Bubsy 3D multiple times, and having played through the refurbished edition, any percent and 100%, I will tell you, the refurbished edition, in my opinion, is the inferior version of Bubsy 3D. I guess if you really have something against tank controls, there is this option for you, but tank controls aren't that bad in my opinion. I'm gonna put this one at the bottom of what could possibly go wrong, because that's probably what we asked ourselves going into this, and now we know. It wasn't meant to be this way. So that's my take. Feel free to share what your favorite Bubsy game is in the comments. Like and subscribe for more Bubsy, and also sometimes Gex, because it's hard to keep Bubsy and Gex separated, if you know what I mean. Hope you guys are looking forward to Bubsy 4D, and I'll see you next time.